Okay, so now we're going to be talking about two-step inequalities, and two-step inequalities are incredibly similar to two-step equations. Just the same thing as the last time. We're going to graph the inequalities, and then it depends on like the greater than or less than signs, how you graph them. And then also if you have to multiply or divide by a negative number, you flip the inequality. So let me just write those rules down again. If we have a greater than or a less than sign, it's an open dot. If we have a greater than or equal to or a less than or equal to sign, it's a closed dot when we graph it. Then if it's x is greater than or x is greater than or equal to, the arrow points to the right. If it's x is less than or x is less than or equal to, the arrow points to the left. And once again, we talked about this in the last video, but in order, like the trick is that if you can have the variable on the left side, then the inequalities point the way you want them to. So like right here, it says x is greater than equal to, those kind of look like the arrows that point to the right, so we point it to the right. Same thing with the stuff that goes to the left. So the one caveat is that you have to make sure that the variable is on the left side. If the variable is not on the left side, then you can flip it around. And then I think I already said this, but like we talked about in the last video, if you ever divide by a negative number, so I'm going to say divide or multiply by a negative number, inequality flips. And that just goes like for all inequalities if you divide or multiply by a negative number. So let's just start going through some examples. First example is u over 2 plus 6 is greater than 14. We're going to set it up exactly the same way as an equation. So we want to get rid of the 2 and the 6. We start by getting rid of the 6 first because it's adding and subtracting. So to get rid of the added 6, we subtract 6 from each side. And we would get u over 2 is equal to 14 minus 6, which is 8. Then we still want to get rid of the 2. So to get rid of the 2, we would multiply each side by 2 because right now it's dividing by 2. The 2's cancel out, and we would get u, and then 8 times 2 is 16. Now, I screwed up. I put an equal sign right here. It's not an equal sign. It's that inequality sign. And so we keep the inequality sign. We keep the same inequality sign as the original because we never multiplied or divided by a negative number. So when we graph this, we find 16 on our number line. And because it's not a greater than or equal to, we have an open dot. And then because the u is on the left side, we can use our little trick. The arrow's pointing towards the right, so my arrow on my graph is going to point towards the right. All right, let's go through another example. So the second example is negative 8x plus 2 is less than 26. We want to get rid of the 2 and the negative 8. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the 2 by subtracting it from each side. We have negative 8x less than 24. Now we want to get rid of the negative 8 by dividing by negative 8 on each side. And this should kind of be like a clue. Oh, we divided by a negative number. So when we divide by a negative number, that inequality goes and flips the other way. So the negative 8's cancel out, we're just left with x, and then 24 divided by negative 8 gives me a negative 3. So my answer is x is greater than negative 3 because that inequality flipped. When we graph it, we find negative 3 on our number line because it's just a greater than sign, it's an open dot. We look at where it's pointing. Because it's pointing to the right, our line is also going to point towards the right because the variable is on the left side. Once again, if the variable is on the right side, you have to just flip everything around. Okay, number 3. So we've got 4 times w minus 10 is less than or equal to negative 12. So in this case, we want to get rid of the 4 and the 10. You can distribute the 4 to kind of get it set up in a prettier way without the parentheses. But we can also, because the 4 is multiplying the W and the 10, to get rid of the 4, we would divide by 4 on each side. And we would divide by 4 first in this case because the 4 is multiplying both the W and the 10. When it's multiplying both chunks or all of the chunks, you want to get rid of it first. So the 4's cancel out right here, and we're just left with W minus 10. And then we didn't divide by negative numbers, so the inequality stays. We've got negative 12 divided by 4 on the right side, which gives me negative 3. Now I want to get rid of the 10. Right now the 10 is subtracting, so to get rid of it, we would add 10 to both sides. And we'd have W. We didn't multiply or divide by negative numbers, so the inequality stays the same. And negative 3 plus 10 gives me a 7. So my answer is W is less than or equal to 7. When I graph that, we find 7 on the number line. Because it's a less than or equal to sign, it's a filled in dot. Because the W is on the left side, we can follow the arrow, which points left. So my graph also points left. All right, one more example. And this example is y minus 1 over 3 is greater than or equal to negative 7. So we want to get rid of the negative 1 and the 3. We get rid of the 3 first because it's dividing both chunks or all chunks. So instead of getting rid of the 1, you can't get rid of the 1 quite yet because the 1 is being divided by the 3. We have to get rid of the 3 first, then we can get rid of the 1. To get rid of the 3, we'd multiply by 3 on both sides because the 3 is dividing. So the 3's cancel out right here. We're just left with y minus 1. We didn't multiply or divide by a negative number, so the inequality stays the same. And then we've got negative 7 times 3 on the right side, which gives me negative 21. Now, I want to get rid of the 1. Right now, the 1 is subtracting, so to get rid of it, we would add 1 to each side. We'd be left with y. Once again, no multiplying or dividing by a negative number, so the inequality stays the same. And then negative 20 plus 1 gives me a negative 20. So my answer is y is greater than or equal to negative 20. When I graph that, we find negative 20 on the number line. And because it's a greater than or equals to sign, it's a filled in dot. Because the variable's on the left side, we can follow that arrow, which points to the right. So my graph also points to the right. And there we have it, 2 steps.